All right, I think we're on for the 3 o'clock. How is everybody today? Great. My name's Tom Tuttle. I'm with Nectar Services Corporation. And we're going to spend a little time talking about monitoring, analytics, and diagnostics for Skype for Business. So a little bit about Nectar. So those of you who may not be familiar with us, we do this across the entire UC suite. We do it for Microsoft Skype for Business, Avaya, and Cisco. All right, and we look at it across the entire platform, not just the server infrastructure, but we look across all the platforms and what it takes to be able to deliver that service. Specifically around Skype for Business, that's what we're focused on here today, is we're a Microsoft depth partner for the SDN API. We'll talk a little bit about what the SDN API is, but essentially what it allows us to do is to create some visibility so that we can actually dive in and actually look at what's happening within that network. Because historically what we've seen is that the Microsoft, whether it be Lync or Skype for Business, the signaling and the media is encrypted. So that means you have a great way of understanding that, yes, you may have a bad call, but then where that problem and where that issue arises, that's always the challenge. So we're going to talk about that. We've been a Microsoft Depth Partner since the inception of that program for about 3 years. So we've helped kind of co-develop that and to where it is today. We're also a Microsoft IT Pro Tools partner, which means that as they go to market, what Microsoft's starting to do is to look at the really 7 categories that it takes to develop and deploy Lync. That means everything from planning and deployment, provisioning, monitoring, reporting, diagnostics, user survey. All of those elements are phases throughout that whole deployment life cycle. And so they've put vendors through a series of certification processes to be able to qualify for that program. Right now, we're one of 3 that do that. Our product itself has really 6 main modules that support the product. It starts with network assessment. So before you even deploy Skype for Business, and even ongoing, we have synthetic capabilities that you're able to generate synthetic calls through the network to understand if the network is ready. We do health and availability infrastructure monitoring. So the server infrastructures, the SBCs, the gateways, the firewalls, we monitor all that, present those in a way that you can easily see what's happening for alerting and alarming, and also get those alerts and alarms to the exact person that needs to get to. When we talk about diagnostics, that's the module that really dives in, and we're going to show you a demo of that here shortly. That's what really dives in. It is integrated with the Microsoft SDN API, and so it can give exact root cause as to where the problem is in the environment. It'll identify congestion, it'll identify network alerts immediately, and it'll allow you, like I said, to eliminate a lot of the time that it takes to isolate and ultimately remediate those problems. We have a call analysis module that looks and gathers up data across that multi-vendor environment. So it's really a view of the entire ecosystem. So again, that layer that starts from the handset that might be on the desk, to the transport layer, to the gateway, to the firewall, and stitching all that information together. So rather than going to 5 or 6 disparate systems to try to look at that data and manually correlate it, we do all that for you. We also have a module around recording compliance. So we have a lot of customers in the healthcare industry and financial services where recording is vital. We don't do the recording, but what we do is we actually verify that the recording is proper, that it was of high quality, and it was stored properly. And then lastly, we do remediation. So we're working closely with both Microsoft and with Cisco to take what we learned from our diagnostics module and communicate that back through a Cisco API, whereby if we're able to identify where the problem is in a Skype for Business environment, we can pinpoint where it is, communicate to Cisco via their API that this is the change that needs to take place, and remediate a call while it's in flight. You'll see more about that this year with announcements, as well as early next year when we productize it. So there's a lot of challenges when we think about it. I mentioned earlier the whole idea that the signaling and media is encrypted. It's very difficult to actually diagnose where that problem is. We oftentimes look at it, it's almost like driving down the road blindfolded, because there's a lot of great reporting capabilities out there that say that, hey, congratulations, you have a bad call. but then trying to figure out where that problem is, particularly if it's intermittent, it's very, very challenging. So you don't know if it's the headset, don't know if it's the endpoint, if it's in the LAN, if it's in the wide area network, or if it's at the Microsoft Edge. So we try to demystify quite a bit of that. For us, we believe that monitoring and reporting, that's sort of just table stakes. And in order to do that, you have to be able to talk to a lot of components in that space. So that means you got to have that view of the entire ecosystem and bring in all that information. When you look at infrastructure, it's not just monitoring the infrastructure, but it's about being able to take it in and then pinpoint where the problem is. So if we're monitoring servers or any other component within that ecosystem, we create dependency trees. So if there's something that goes wrong, it goes red, we try to say, hey, here's exactly where that problem is. So you simply drill through mouse clicks to find, here's the actual issue. Now we also have the ability to make sure that particular alarm or alert gets to the right person, because not every tier 3 engineer needs to handle the simpler issues. So we make sure that it can get distributed to the proper sales engineer or technician to solve the problem. So then as far as reporting, we have the ability, since we pull in so much data, you can take that data and slice and dice it any way you can. Now, because we have so many ways in which we're capturing information, what we did is we said, you know what, there's a lot of great analytics in there. Now, we're not going to go build that whole analytic engine ourselves, so we actually leverage a third-party provider who takes in this data and is able to customize this and present it in any format that our customers want. From the standpoint of high-level dashboards to being able to look at every type of device that is operating in your system to see how many iPhone users do I have, what's their quality of experience. To be able to look at conferences throughout the month. How is my conference growth trending? How much app sharing am I using versus video conferencing? To be able to do high-level dashboards around that same type of information, you could do it at a site level. Take it all the way down to the user, so you can actually look at an individual user within your environment to say, okay, here's all the sessions they're making, which ones are the bad sessions, and begin to triage that. Now, like I said, for us, this is the table stakes, because knowing what's happening in your environment is one thing. Trying to find out where the root of the problem is the other. So that's where we get into root cause diagnostics. For us, that's what reduces that time to remediation. That's what it comes down to. And that shifts an operations team or an IT team from being reactive and always just trying to find problems to being able to take advantage of that time to become more proactive. Take advantage of all the trending information we're providing, and ultimately, that translates to real dollars. It's less time that they're having to spend on issues and more focused on the user experience. That's a snapshot from what we create is a quality of session record. So what I'm going to do here is talk to you a little bit just about how the SDN API and how we leverage it. So if you're not familiar with it, this is a program Microsoft started about 3 years ago in the summer of 2012. And essentially it's a very lightweight service. It's their API that runs on the front end, and then it communicates to what they call a Skype for Business SDN API Manager. So it offloads that from the front end, and from there it communicates to our UC Diagnostics platform. And what it gives us is start of call information. So we get that initial signaling information so we can do root cause of any signaling issues. If there are signaling errors, we can immediately do a SIP ladder diagram and look at those errors and try to pinpoint it. Now, if we were to take a look at this in a normal environment, let's say this is either a cloud, this could be a cloud hoster, this could be a service provider, or this could be an enterprise with their data center here. Doesn't make any difference. But essentially, you've got the link infrastructure sitting in the data center. You got carrier networks in between that are traveling out to remote sites. Now, historically, one of the knocks that Skype for Business has had is that you get notified that the endpoint had a problem. And that's where it would start. Again, this goes back to not knowing exactly where that problem is. Is it in the remote site? Is it at my carrier edge? Is it in the data center? Or at the other remote end? By leveraging the SDN API, we're able to then pinpoint using our analyzer technology and our network awareness to say, you know what, I can measure the call quality as it leaves that site. I can measure it as it enters my data center. I can measure it as it exits the data center, as it hits the remote edge, and the experience of that other remote user. So what that tells me in this case, if I got all those pinpoints or those points of demarcation, I can quickly say, the problem I had here is in that local area network or in that remote site. And so now you've removed all this guesswork as to not only where the problem is, but you've been able to quickly say it's not here, it's not here. Now, if this had been someplace else and the red dot might have been right here, the green here, I know there's probably an issue right here on my carrier edge. You're able to have a much different conversation with your carrier partner when you have that kind of data. So let me just cut over here and I'll show you a quick demo of what I'm talking about. So this is our UC Diagnostics platform. Now, it has the ability to take in two types of really alerts and alarms. One is network. Since we have access and intelligence around the network, we passively peer with a routed network. So we know how a call gets from point A to point B. So if you had a route go down, or a router go down, or a path change, you'd get notified immediately, and you would see every session that was impacted by that. It's a very quick query. Other type of alert you get is that if you set key performance indicators, so if I hit a certain percentage of poor calls, you'll get notified of those and which calls those are. You have the ability to look at all your routes that you have in your network. You can look at a site level. You can set up your sites. So as sites have problems, you can get identified about a particular location as opposed to just an aggregated information. So in this case, I'm going to do just a quick search for an individual. Let's say I had a user that called in and they told me they had a problem. So I'd go down in here and I would put that particular user. Now I know their first name. And, oops, I just spelled their name wrong. And I know that they had a problem sometime yesterday. So I can go back 30 days if I wanted to, but I'm going to just do a search there real quick. And what will come back to me is every call that that individual made yesterday. And let me just expand this a little bit. Now I know I can sort on any one of these columns. In this case, I'm going to sort on network loss. And when I do that, it so happens that the worst call they had was yesterday at 9:30 a.m. Now, right from that particular pace, I can see that you can see there's two MOS scores right here in this column here. You got the first MOS score is the optimal MOS score that call could have graded based on the codecs in use. The second one is what the actual MOS score was measured. Now, I want to dive in to figure out what the problem was with that call. So I'll do a little query here to show the quality of session record. And right away what it does is to me, it tells me the to and the from, the duration, who they were calling. And if it starts to identify what the problem was, it's going to tell me. If it experienced congestion, it's going to point that out to me. It also starts to build a topology diagram. So I know exactly how that call went from point A to point B. The routers it went through, the interfaces it went through. And as you can see here, these measurement points, this is what I was talking about on the previous slide, where I'm actually measuring the call quality at certain locations. And that's what's unique, because I can look at the entire duration of a call, not just the entire segment. So in the case of the user that calls in and said, I had a bad session, if you were to go to the quality experience database that you get out of Skype, it has average call metric. So it may show that it was a 3.5. Well, in actuality, that user says, well, it was a much worse than that. That's because it's an average. What it doesn't tell you is that call, maybe it was a 4-minute call, and the first 3.5 minutes, it was a 4. That last 30 seconds, though, it degraded to a point they terminated the call. That's what it doesn't tell you. So we're able to actually graph that call from beginning to end. Oops, if I know how to use this little mouse here. I can actually look at that particular call and how it performed throughout the entire duration. As you can see here, this call started poor, it improved, and then again degraded back and forth. So we can look at the entire. Now, the other thing that it allows us to do is if it was a conference call, I could actually put in a conference ID in that same query, and I could actually look at every participant in that call live while it was going on to find out who had the problem and begin to make and begin to take action at that point. So now what I'm interested in is that, okay, yeah, I know this was a bad call, but how do I find out the root cause? So in this case, I can see that it was green all the way out to the destination. On the way back, it was still green, but as it left my core network, I had degradation here as well as at the endpoint. But I also see a red triangle here that tells me this is where the source and the root cause of that problem was. So what I can do here is I can look at some QoS metrics. So when I click on this, I'm going to look at really the last 4 hours in that particular router interface. I'm very curious as to what's going on there. And when I do that, it's going to come back to me. First of all, it's going to give me a graph. The first graph it's going to give me is a graph around actual packet loss. So this is how much packet loss I'm across all applications, not just my Skype application. And if I hover over any one of these, it's telling me that, hey, at this peak here, I'm dropping about 100,000 packets. Now, I'm really curious as to why, though, because that's interesting that I'm dropping packets. What's more interesting is what can I do about it? If I was to look at this results tab, and let me expand this a little bit, what this is telling me here, and if this is in the hands of a real good engineer, they're going to look at this and go, okay, what I've got here is I can see all my applications. I can see what the QoS is set at. In this case, I've got my QoS set at 15% for my Link application or my Skype application. Well, look what happens here. Several times over that 4-hour period, I'm trying to push way more traffic through that queue than I can possibly take. That's what's causing the congestion. This here it happens so commonly. There's a number of enterprises we get involved with, they believe their QoS is set at 20-25% in a queue, and it turns out it might be set at 15 for a particular application. This is the kind of data that will take oftentimes 3 or 4 tools, 3 or 4 people, and possibly 3 to 4 days to try to solve. This is done in a couple of matter of mouse clicks. This is the kind of information I was talking about before, where we're actually going in and taking that to the next step, where we're actually working with both Microsoft and Cisco to take that same information, find out and pinpoint where the problem is. Now, we're not going to make the change ourselves because nobody wants us dipping our fingers into their Cisco router. But, however, Cisco has an APEC EM API, which they develop, which they're productizing, which we communicate to through our policy engine to make a change. If you go to our website, there's a demo of that out there. We've demoed this at Cisco Live in both Milan and in San Diego, and working with Microsoft on this, where we see a link call, find the problem, communicate the change that needs to take place while a call is in flight. SDN is not that far away. We'll have 3 or 4 use cases next year that we'll productize, and you'll see more of that to come. Questions I can answer for anybody? Yes?
How much bandwidth on top of the standard Skype call is it going to add?
So the API itself is extremely lightweight, has less than 1% utilization, and any concern they had even at scale, that's why they introduced the SDN API Manager, to be able to just get it off the front end as quickly as possible. So it's very lightweight. So it's a very subset, because for us, all we're using is the signaling and some of the endpoint information, because we then incorporate that with everything else we're already gathering out of the monitoring server. So we do all the data analytics, we're pulling out of the QoE database, but as far as that initial, to be able to do the real-time stuff, we're using just that API, which is a very small subset, very, very lightweight. It has very little or no impact on the front end. Any other questions? We're in booth 519, just a couple rows down here. If you have any other questions or want to stop by and spend any time with us, all right? Thank you very much.